Oh, it's one of those what did I learn things again since I was gone a couple of weeks. And briefly, the first part of my time away was to go to Glen Arbor and spend some time with friends, and that was a wonderful thing. And then I had 3 days of, I guess you'd call it a staycation of some sort. And then the last 5 or so days, I wandered down to Marion, Ohio, to attend the chapter of the Order of Lutheran Franciscans. And I will tell you a little bit more about that as we move forward. But in any event, I think looking back to the weed situation, I'm kind of going to speak over Ashley a little bit probably. A weed might be seen as a plant that is in the wrong space according to the wishes of the gardener. Damnation comes when the gardener chooses to remove the weed and throw it away. But what if weeds serve a real value? I'm not a gardener, so I asked Google. I should have asked Ashley. But the question to the answer is yes, weeds can serve a real value. They can improve the soil, they can check erosion and moisture control, serve as a pollinator attractor, and potentially serve as free edibles and medicine, and probably so much more. So, was Jesus wrong in using this illustration concerning the kingdom? Well, of course not. You see, when growing wheat, weeds can reduce grain quality, harbor pests and disease, and create harvest issues. That can happen. Yet, with all that said, he says wait until the harvest to eliminate the weeds. And he says that to reduce the risk of harming the wheat. Well, in this allegory, I think maybe he is saying that God can be patient with us, can be forgiving and full of grace. Maybe even weeds might be seen as of value since they are part of God's creation, to see just how things might unfold. And certainly weeds can be a bridge builder to a better life, and I can attest to that. My life was filled with weeds many years ago when I bottomed out, but because I bottomed out, I found AA, and now I'm here to preach today, and I was largely restored. For various reasons, this is a timely lesson, since we have just finished the Create and Care Camp. A wonderful experience, an effort to explore God's love through the natural world. And they talked about water and how it's important to grow and nourish the earth, how we are from dust, connections, interdependence, that we're stronger together, that when we look at God's creation, we recognize how things come together, us and the natural world as well. This lesson is timely for yet another reason. For the last 5 days away, I attended the annual chapter of the Order of Lutheran Franciscans, which is the only established order in the ELCA. I've just finished the first year of a 2-year journey to determine if I might take initial vows to this order. And Franciscans follow in the footsteps of Jesus and pay great attention to St. Francis of Assisi and how he moved forward with the task of sharing God's love. Now, within all of that, to join an order, you're building a community, and the intensity of building a community is something like I've never quite experienced before. It was a remarkable thing, people coming together with the same desire and sharing with one another and lifting one another up. But the intensity of that is off the hook different. And I'm excited about it in the end. And I want to learn more about just building community, and we're moving forward. Now, Franciscans, as the way they interpret Jesus, and of course St. Francis of Assisi, they are deeply engaged in environmental issues. They are deeply engaged in nonviolence. And they advocate for the poor, the lost, and the forgotten. That's kind of what Franciscans do. They're not really so much up here as they are here, and boots on the ground trying to make a difference. St. Francis once said, share the gospel always, but only as a last resort use words. In any event, the Order of Lutheran Franciscans are a part of the Franciscan world, and there are 4 different orders throughout the world, and they interact together. We've got, of course, the biggest one is the Catholic Franciscans. They're the biggest. Then we have what are called the Ecumenical Franciscan community, and then we have the Episcopal community, and then we have the Lutheran community, which is springing strictly from the ELCA. And that Franciscan world recognizes each other, works together to do various ministry things, and it's quite a thing. Now, tied back to Jesus' lesson this morning on sorting out weeds and wheat, and back to Franciscans, they do things in their order to try to separate wheat. By taking a vow of poverty. And taking a vow of poverty in this context, in this world, means that we are asking ourselves the question, how much is enough? How much is really enough? Do I really need it? Does the quest for more stuff lead to a distraction when sharing the gospel? These are questions. A weed in this case might be seen as overconsumption, greed, hoarding, etc. Those might be weeds. When we go past the vow of poverty, then we've got the vow of chastity. And here's what it means for us. To love all of humanity with no distinction. To recognize that all people are created by God and are sacred in God's eyes. And to work for the lifting up of all people. And so what that really boils down to, again, is sharing the peace that we talk about here. Compassion, mercy, justice, forgiveness, and grace. A weed might be seen as being, in this case, judgmental, gossiping, shunning, making fun of people, excluding people, etc., etc. Maybe trampling over people to get ahead. And an important part of that vow of chastity means to eliminate all forms of human violence. The prophets declared that it was God's intention that we should beat our swords into plowshares. We know our economy is built on guns and butter, but the suggestion would be forget about the guns, do more butter. Jesus preached a blessing of peace for the peacemakers. He was angered at Peter that very last night in his life when he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. The crowd comes to take him. Peter jumps up and slashes a guy's ear off. Jesus goes off on Peter and restores the guy's ear. Of course, there are all kinds of violence, not just physical killing or hurting, but emotional, intellectual, spiritual, sexual, social, and so on and so on. All of this stuff could be seen as violence. The final vow is one of obedience to the peace and those who share it. If something other than the peace is in play in our world, it's at that point that Franciscans might choose to protest. If they see something that is out of order, they will always bring it to the attention of the people. And in the spirit of Jesus, you remember that last week of his life at the temple. And it was one big protest to a great extent. Speaking about the oppression that went on. And this is the spirit of Jesus coming through. So with all this said, weeds and wheat are really simply spiritual matters. When Jesus teaches, when he preaches, it's always about our internal spiritual drive. So, the wheat is the peace, the weeds are the opposite of the peace. Now, the problem is, if we're honest with ourselves, we're all a little bit weeds and wheat, right? None of us are, we're a complex mixture of this stuff. But the good news is that we are not thrown into some fire because we're saved by grace. Heaven on earth and beyond might be seen simply as the absence of spiritual weeds. How wonderful would that be? Hell might be being taken over by those weeds, and I can attest that for a while I lived in hell. So the good news, I believe, is the instruction of Jesus' lessons, that they provide us with the fact that we have each other on this journey, that we are not alone, that we are given the opportunity to receive God's love and to share God's love and to continue the reordering, the renewal of our hearts and minds to do that much, much more. And we do have community here at St. John, a community that is designed to lift one another up and to support each other. And that's something we certainly do. So, with all that said, we are never alone. We are always loved. And to God be the glory. Amen.